Okay, and first I want to compare Elizabeth's reaction on Frankenstein's secret to the modern woman. Okay, in this part we can see that even though Elizabeth knows that Frankenstein has something that didn't tell her, but she chose not to ask. It makes Elizabeth different from the woman in our age. Now, actually, I think, as Emil just said, that it can be interpreted as the change of the position of woman. And Elizabeth is a symbol of the woman in that age. Her attitude toward Frankenstein's secrets is also totally different from modern woman, and women in Elizabeth's age's position is lower, and they don't have that much courage, or we can say they don't have that right to ask what man's secret. So in this part, we can know that Elizabeth knows Frankenstein has something didn't tell her, but she didn't ask because maybe because she just think that she want to wait for Frankenstein want to tell her voluntarily someday, and she chose not to ask. But in our age, if Frankenstein is the boyfriend in the ladies here, will you not ask? Then you will ask him in person, and what happened in these years, right? Yeah, that's one huge that's one huge difference between Elizabeth and the women in our age. And now I will read out my creative revision, and it also has some related to what I just said. Okay.
So Tiffany presented Elizabeth's perspective, and you will present a modern Elizabeth.
I also presented it as Elizabeth's perspective, but actually we have boys version and girls version, and the original version is a woman to present man's point of view. So we have 3 different versions.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. It had been few weeks after I sent a letter to Frankenstein. He finally come back. I was so glad that I rushed to the door and can't wait to welcome him. At the moment I saw his picked body and emaciated face, the tears started to blur my eyes. I couldn't imagine what kind of life he had been through. Actually, I still can't ascertain if he still loved me, even though I have received his reply. However, I hid my real feeling and welcomed him with compassion, trying not to let him notice my agitation inside. In these days, Frankenstein looks like that he is insane. His action was really weird. Sometimes he looked despondent, and sometimes he became really crazy and mad. It was really scary, but I chose not to ask him what had happened in these years. I believed that one day, when he is well prepared, he will tell me all the things. However, why can't he tell me right now? Is this a symbol of lack of trust, or it means that he don't love me anymore? It seems like I am the only one who can give him consolation. I always accompanied him and tried to comfort him with my whisper. I cried for him, and sometimes I cry because of the fear and agitation inside. I love him, but I'm not sure if he will recover from this kind of wound. The only thing I can advise him is to be resigned. There are still a lot of questions in my heart, but I didn't ask him. Maybe I'm not courageous enough. Maybe it's because I'm too trusting in him. Or maybe I don't really want to ask. I want him to tell me willingly. Will the real Frankenstein come back? Okay, and I didn't mention that Elizabeth is thinner than before like that because I want, just in my point of view, Elizabeth is, he cares Frankenstein what happens to him and not care of herself, so she didn't notice that she's not thinner and as beautiful as before. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So you have the last part, right? The relevance. How about 5 minutes? I hope that we'll have some discussion. Yeah, so 5 minutes.
So we like to discuss the performance of female in Frankenstein, and which means the role of the female in the society and family. And just like what they just said, Caroline, Elizabeth, and Justine is a influence to Victor Frankenstein, and Agatha, Sophie, and Eve is a influence on the monster. And the first female shown in the novel is Caroline, and she Alvin Frankenstein encountered her when she was taking care of her seriously ill father. And Caroline's greatest tenderness obviously make her an exceptional woman. And she seems to show no sign of character blemishes or common human weaknesses such as selfish demands or self-pity even when she reaches her death. And Victor claims that the fortitude and benignity of the best of women did not desert her. And in the end, Caroline seems to resign herself cheerfully to death. And Caroline introduced the second character, which is Elizabeth. And to Caroline, Elizabeth was more than a duty. And it was...
Okay, wait, you are doing the summary, right? Kind of summary of the main points.
Conclusion. And also the analysis.
Okay, but could you skip the summary part and just reach the conclusion? Yeah,
Okay,
or
so,
maybe the relevance to us.
Well, Elizabeth is the kind of girl that no one can behold her without looking at her as a sacred angel that comes from the heaven. After Victor released from the prison, he went back to Geneva, and he found that both he and Elizabeth changed. They both languished because they have experienced too many things. Well, Elizabeth still keeps her pure and sacrificing image as before mentioned in the novel, and she never stops worrying and caring about Victor. Well, although she has no idea what happened to Victor, she is always there by Victor's side, and she is just a strong spiritual support to Victor. And as for Victor, Elizabeth seems to be the only one that comforts him while he was having those complicated emotions. And like what they just said, we think that Victor is a coward for many things because he tends to escape from the reality, and he should be responsible for many things, but he just finds excuses to hide his faults, and he doesn't have the courage to admit and respond for the things he should do. Yes, and we think that Elizabeth's love towards Victor is just like sunshine, and she's love is like the sunlight which never stops sending worms to the earth. And even though Victor is hiding something from Elizabeth, and she knows that, but she still gives him all the love and support to him. And
Final conclusion, please.
Okay. The final conclusion is that the female characters in the play are essential to understand Frankenstein's nature and ultimately to arouse the reader's pity for him.
You mean the female characters are there to arouse readers' sympathy, or to be sympathetic?
Sympathetic.
Okay, so they play the sympathetic role. Okay. Although Walton also plays a role of being sympathetic, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The last 5 minutes. You haven't really talked about the passage's relevance to you, right? Maybe Wayne touched on it, and he said that contemporary women would not do it. What would you have done? Any responses? This is one question. The other question is, could you compare Tiffany's version with Wayne's version of Elizabeth? How are they different?
Wayne's version is actually more feminine to me, because Wayne's voices out more concerns.
I'm not a woman, so my version is just my guessing of the stereotype of woman in my head. But Tiffany is a real woman, so maybe her version is more like the real woman's point of view.
I think that Tiffany's version plays Elizabeth as a more sentimental person, while Elizabeth in her version cares about the appearance, while she kept saying that maybe she's old and Victor doesn't love her anymore. And to me, Wen's version, Elizabeth seems to be stauncher and more rational. Yes, but they both show the deep love of Elizabeth to Victor.
Elizabeth. You mean I have to think of myself being born in that age today? That's lack of trust, and the love cannot build.
Love cannot live where there's no trust.
No, it's not. I'll ask him if and not be so passive. If he doesn't want to face me or show his what's hiding inside, I don't think it's a real relationship that can last.
I think that although Victor has told Elizabeth that he will tell him the truth of his secret until their marriage. If I were Elizabeth, I would send him the text message or phone call to tell him that, tell me right now. Don't put off until our marriage.
I will wait him one day he want to tell me. No.
We need to finish now, but let me just give you a small episode from a film I just saw called Hereafter. Do you know the film? By Clint Eastwood, directed by Clint Eastwood. In the film, the male protagonist is a psychic. No, he has the ability to know the other people's other lives or previous lives, and then he gets to be really close to one woman, and but he does not want to have psychic connection with her. But this woman asked him to do it, and then he realized that upon touching her hand, that this woman was molested by her father, and then they broke up. Yeah. So talking about secrets. To speak for Victor, I guess one reason for his telling the secret after the wedding night is that he saw that he might die on the wedding night. And then he might not want Elizabeth to worry. And that could be a reason for his putting off the telling her the secret. Yeah.
This is only one side,
Yeah, right. In other words, right, male protectiveness may not be always positive for the others. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Could you come over here? You're group 3, right? Okay. Now that you are seated here, after group 2's discussion, I'll ask you, what do you think? I'll get one of you to ask a question of them, okay? So be attentive. Yeah, please be seated. You also have a PowerPoint. We are a little bit delayed. I think we'll have our discussion till 10:40, and then we'll take a break. I know some of you have the 翻译学程考试. I'll let you leave earlier. Yeah. Okay, are you done? Please be seated. I think you are really great PowerPoint designers. Okay, go ahead. All seated? So, okay, I think I can sit here.
Okay, so I will start off by talking a little bit about the excerpt analysis. Will you please turn the slide? Next. Okay, so before I begin my short analysis, I will first like to talk about the function of the letters. The letters, both at the beginning and the end of the story in the novel, uses a literary device called framing, which, like a picture frame, sets the major premise for the story. This technique eases the reader into the story and adds a subplot that gives the main story textile and richness. And also, this framing technique gives us as readers an idea of how the story is arranged. We can understand that the unnamed stranger, which is Victor, is the general narrator, and that Walton, on behalf of us as readers, is his audience in the story. So the letters set up a frame narrative that encloses the main narrative. Okay, and the use of multiple frame narratives calls attention to the story itself. It adds new layers of complexity to the already complicated relationship between author and reader. For example, Walton writes to his sister, and Victor writes to his beloved Elizabeth and to his father. They correspond to each other by using letters. With each new character, it sort of adds a new dimension to the story. So this is one of the main functions of the frame narrative. And it also reminds the reader of, just like I said just now, the reader of other characters in the novel. The shift of perspectives brings about the facts and the personalities of the narrators themselves. If Victor didn't correspond with his father or Elizabeth, and if Walton didn't correspond with his sister, then we wouldn't know what type of character the father, Elizabeth, and Margaret is. So, next. Okay, so the narrative in Frankenstein basically starts from Walton, and it moves on to Frankenstein, and then to the monster, and back to Walton finally. This narrative conveys important information that serves to advance the plot, while also offering some sense of validity. For example, Walton actually meets the monster in the end. the narratives also serves as a means of social interaction. Back then, like in the story, people, they don't really correspond with each other, and it's especially for someone like Victor, who is always immersed in his studies. Without writing letters, there would actually be no mention or no news of what he is doing, how he's faring with his studies. Okay, so now on to the analysis. For my own part, I begin to love him as a brother. My affection for my guest increases every day. He excites at once my admiration and my pity to an astonishing degree. 2 points are made in this short passage. Here, Walton is elated to have finally found a friend. Second, the evolution of their relationship from stranger to friends. In letter 2, Walton tells his sister that on page 19, he has no friend, and I desire the company of a man who could sympathize with me, whose eyes would reply to mine. So when he finally finds Victor and rescues him and begins to slowly know him after he rehabilitates, Walton is actually quite amused to find someone who shares his common interest in both knowledge and adventure. So this line also indicates that Walton has grown closer to Victor. On page 27, his constant and deep grief fills me with sympathy and compassion. Second passage. He is gentle, yet so wise. His mind is cultivated, and when he speaks, although his words are called with the choicest art, yet they flow with rapidity and unparalleled eloquence. From this passage, Walton believes that Victor is the type of friend that he has been looking for all along. Again, on page 19, he says, I have no one near me, gentle yet courageous, possessed of a cultivated as well as of a capricious mind, whose tastes are like my own, to prove or amend my plans. Victor here is thus the guidance, not to mention the companion that Walton hopes to continue his journey with. So from letter 4, we can understand that there are both similarities and differences between Walton and Victor. The similarities would be, one of the similarities would be that they both desire knowledge. They are eager to learn more. But the different side of Walton is that he wants friends, he wants companions. Unlike Victor, who is always immersed in his work, he omits his father and family. This is the different side of both of Walton from Victor. And so from this short passage, we can see that Walton is finally is pretty happy to finally find someone who shares his common interests.